All right.
Let's go.
We're
Here
doing
with
it.
the Dakota Boys, new
Yep.
band, a lot of shelf near you. Um, I'm excited to be here today with my new friend Chris Swanson. No relation to Ron Swanson from Parks and Rec, I'm guessing.
I get Ron Swanson a lot though. I get a lot of Nick Offerman queries, even
It doesn't.
regardless of the name.
It doesn't totally surprise me because when I saw your picture for your bio, I was like, you actually got a little bit of like a Ron Swanson vibe to you too. Like you could be like cousins.
It's routine. I mean, like probably twice a week, I have Ron Swanson conversations.
Nice,
I don't hate it.
nice. I mean, yeah, it's to be compared to a character in a show. Like he's a pretty good character.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Cool. So a little bit about Chris. He co-founded Secretly Canadian in 1996, expanded into Secretly Group, and helped to release some artists that you might have heard of, like Bon Iver, indie artists who started out obscure and later were able to reach a wider recognition. And he did that through building a robust distribution label services arm through Secretly Distribution. So I'm excited to have him on the podcast today, talk a little bit about the journey for anyone who's maybe considering going in an indie route or working with like rather than a major record label route, staying indie while still making a bigger impact and being able to reach a wider audience without losing your soul. So, Chris, thank you so much for taking the time and space to be here on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. So maybe to kick things off, would love to hear a little bit about your journey and how you founded the Secretly Group and were able to help artists like Bon Iver grow to what they became today.
Yeah, I mean, it started, just as a kid being obsessed with my dad's and my stepmom's and my stepdad's record collections. They were very different from one another, and I just poured through them. And then I got involved like in the Columbia House tape club, where you'd get like 12 tapes for a penny. And I started to scheme in junior high where it wasn't so much a scheme, it was very much built in, where I got everyone in band class, most everyone, probably, I don't know, 5-6 dozen people to sign up for it also. And I'd get 4 free tapes. Wow. For everyone I got to sign up. And I basically was like learning the canon, through the tape club, and I'd go to the library and I'd check out records, and it just became so fun. Not only did I love the music, but I loved pouring through the album art and the liner notes and everything, and just the whole like record culture started to. I became obsessed with it, and when I finally got to college and I had the opportunity to become a college radio DJ, it was like I was given entrance into the gates. It was just incredible. And I worked my way up in the first year to become music director at the radio station, and I would get calls from all the radio pluggers and record labels to try to get me to feature the albums that they were pushing at the time in our studio, because at the time, this was pre-MP3, this was pre-streaming and everything. It was like someone need to have the record or the CD in order to play it on air. And I kind of at first kind of relished the power, and the like it felt like kind of a sacred responsibility. I was kind of a little pretentious about it, but then after a while, I started to realize that actually it was. I was getting a little glimpse into the music industry, and it was beautiful, and I was like, I wanted to, because I think I was going to shows all the time. I was promoting DIY shows. I was, still buying a lot of records. I was giving plasma twice a week so I could, keep buying CDs and I don't know. I started to daydream more about how I might participate in the culture as more than just a fan. And I started talking to my boss at the cafeteria I worked at in the dorm, and my dear friend Eric, who was co-music director at the radio station, and my brother was about ready to come to college, and I beckoned Ben. I was like, Ben, I think we're going to start a record label. Eric and Jonathan and I are going to start a record label. Come to Bloomington and we'll start it together. And he said, and he was in. And so we started this label, and and it was just like, and then we were like, okay, who do we want to put out? Like what are we going to do? And we didn't really know what we were doing. But I was really obsessed with a 45 that was released at the time by a very obscure band from Ohio called Songs Ohio, which was Jason Molina's project, and reached out to Jason, and he agreed. We released a 7-inch record, and we did 1,000 of them with hand silk screen artwork. We folded them all, hand numbered all of them, 1,000 of them, and we got contacted by a few distributors. One, Cargo UK in London, and Concurrent in Amsterdam, and they were buying 100, 200 each. And I think in my brain, I thought that we would be kind of slinging them, a couple here, a couple there, to record stores all over, on consignment and everything. I didn't even know what a distributor was, and I started to kind of, the music industry just kind of started to come into focus for me very slowly. Or it took years and years, but it was beautiful. We were just these kids in a small college town in the middle of the country, and here we were slinging this 45 that we made all over the globe, and it sold out quickly, and we just became addicted, totally intoxicated by the process. It felt great. It was humbling in a lot of ways. We were stubbing our toes all over the place, but it was, we were on the path. We didn't have a business plan other than put a little bit of money in. We all pooled some money, and then hopefully it comes back, and then you do it again. That was pretty much the process. And somewhere along the line in that first year, we created a distribution company, because we realized, as we were calling up distributors and trying to get their attention, we realized we were pretty low on the food chain, and we thought one means of climbing that food chain and not being just this pest that was calling to get them to reorder or to pay, was to have more new releases than we as a fledgling record label could supply. And so we reached out to other small record labels at the time and asked, hey, could we, labels run by one person, and there were 4 of us. We had a lot of people power on our side. We're like, could we be your distributor? And one of those labels was Jagjaguwar, Darius. I reached out to him. I was a big fan of the albums he was putting out, and he said, yeah, that'd be great. And so we created a warehouse in the basement that Ben and I lived in, and we started, all of a sudden, instead of having 2 new releases a year, because we picked up 6 other record labels, all of a sudden we were having like a couple a month, and it really helped us kind of build an international distribution network, which felt really good. And therein Secretly Distribution was born. And it took years to realize. I think we were very much tickled by being involved in a DIY process and learning everything, and and having to kind of piece it all together ourselves. But it wasn't until years later that it really kind of gelled as a real philosophy about doing it independently, doing it free of the major labels and major distributors. And it involved for about 8 to 10 years us working with Warner Music Group with their distribution arm, because we felt like that was kind of keeping up with the Joneses, like, oh, you gotta work with the big distributor to make it work. And it felt so good when we left that distributor after almost a decade and went completely independent again. And I think it took that shift for us to be like, oh, I see, to really be participating in and contributing in a meaningful way to a purely independent like path to market.
Cool. That's a great story. So what I'm hearing you say is that really this is just born out of pure love and passion for the craft itself.
We just wanted to participate. We just wanted to be involved, in the culture.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And through that journey, you were able to get really plugged in and energized, by the process of, helping, bring that art to life and distributing it. And you even had an experience where when you kind of plugged in with some of these bigger machines, you realize, wow, like I'm actually like that. There's something off. There's something that doesn't quite feel right with that when you kind of reclaimed that energy plug and went back to the independence that you kind of re-plugged in.
Mm-hmm.
Curious to hear your perspective on right now. Feels like an interesting moment, for independent artists and independent record labels, and compared to the grand scheme of like the history of the music industry, when maybe in the past you would have needed more distribution or needed more like of established company. Curious what your in your decades of experience, what are some of the shifts that you've seen in the overall distribution flow or process, and what do you think that right now, if there's an artist listening to this or watching this who wants to kind of like catch the wave of what's coming next, where do you see things going?
Yeah, about a decade ago, I think, with the rise of digital service providers like, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, et cetera, it really democratized and decentralized distribution, at least digital distribution, where artists no longer needed a label gatekeeper in order to get on the platforms, right? They still maybe needed one to get records in stores, because that is actually, it takes kind of a robust system and machine to efficiently get records in a lot of stores, especially globally. But digitally, anyone could do it, with a few clicks of the mouse, and so that put record labels in kind of, it put a spin on record labels for a little bit. Luckily, I think we were just growing at the time where we didn't really feel the bump, because we were kind of on the ascent at just the right moment, where I think had we been a little bigger sooner, we maybe would have felt the shake of that. But we were just kind of riding between these waves a little bit. But a lot of labels got spooked. It was a little bit existential. And so all of a sudden, artists can distribute on their own directly. They can do direct deals with distributors, bypassing a record label, getting distribution rates, which distributors take less of a percentage than record labels do traditionally. And it was great. But I think what's happened over the last decade is, and there's some real big success stories of artists doing it completely independently, working with no record label. They are effectively their own record label, or their managers providing the record label services, and just going direct through a distributor. A lot of big success stories. But I think through the years, I feel like right now record labels are, I feel, on the are growing again, because I think artists are starting to see the distinction between the services they're getting from a distributor. They're having a few people work their record, and they're having to then hire out all these other third parties, and like publicists, digital marketing, designer, production people to make the vinyl, et cetera, et cetera. They're kind of assembling almost their own Navy SEAL team, which takes work and then those teams don't really necessarily know how to collaborate, because they just got involved together on this project a month ago, and so artists are kind of looking at that and doing campaigns that way with somewhat of a skeleton crew that's just working together for the first time, versus a record label where, like for us, like when we put out like a Bon Iver album, we have, like 55 people who do many campaigns together throughout a year, know how to like collaborate and and use telekinesis with one another, speak in a shorthand, and do this campaign on behalf of the artist. It's just a little bit different, and so I think as the marketplace shifts, it's kind of a choice for an artist. Artists have choices. Do they want to kind of work with the smaller team and take a larger share, or do they want to take a smaller share and work with a larger team that does it all the time? And it's really, I think there's no really right or wrong answer, but and it's great that artists have more choices. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So what I'm hearing you say is that really the one of the main benefits of working with the right label is that there's a team of cross-functional departments that already have a relationship with each other, and rather than just sort of like having all these different limbs that you kind of piece together, sort of like Frankenstein,
Hmm.
you have this pre-built organism that already
Yeah.
has all the different bases covered, and that makes it more streamlined versus having to recreate all those different limbs on your
Yeah.
own. um I'm curious, from your perspective, sort of like the movement towards maybe independent record labels versus major record labels. Is there a distinction there as well? And who do you think is the best fit for like a label group like what you're doing versus like a major record label artist versus someone who maybe is at a stage where they should focus on being indie first, or like how do you kind of view those life cycles?
Yeah, I think they're very different. Maybe ultimately providing the same service, engaging in the same processes. There's probably very little difference between them, but I think that there is a specific makeup, or there are certain parameters that are very different. And one is independence. You have the ability, which you don't really have the ability at a major, to have a relationship with the founder.
Mm.
You have the ability to have a relationship with the owner and the decision, the ultimate decision maker. Um, and you can have a robust relationship with the entire team, but being able to to text or get on the phone with the owner and have the owner kind of look you in the eye and say, hey, we're going to do this. That's not, we're going to deliver this for you. That's not possible at a major. It's just from a scale perspective, it's not possible. They're releasing thousands of albums a year. And also, some of these companies are publicly traded. It's just, you're not, it's just not realistic. And I think the other thing is the people, I do think there are really great people who work at majors, just like there are at indies. The only thing is having kind of that continuity. The continuity is challenged consistently. It's almost because like there's regime changes constantly. The people that you maybe fell in love with, that you felt like really got you and understood you at the major label, will they be there in a year and a half? Will they be there by the time you release your first album or by your second album? Statistically speaking, highly unlikely. And I feel like that's something that sort of consistency is something that is special with independence. We don't have those types of wholesale regime change that majors love and are built around.
Mm.
And then I think the other thing is oftentimes the way that a major is able to beat to beat an indie is with a big check. And that can be great. That can be like life changing money sometimes, right? And you can't begrudge a young artist at the start of their career from seeing this and being like, wow, this could change so much in my life, my family's life. That's great. But I do think there is something very stressful that it's a bargain, you know, and that's the bargain that the artist taking that big check makes, is that it sets the bar for success and the perception of success so much higher.
Mm.
And and oftentimes I see artists who maybe should be still kind of have their career slow cooking, and really focused on fundamentals and really building something um, real sturdy,
Mm.
with incremental goals, with stretch goals and whatnot. All of a sudden, because they're taking a really large check, the goal immediately becomes they have to hit here in order to feel secure in the
Mm.
business of what they've built. And there's so many ways that whether or not they're successful gets telegraphed to them. Some is just compare culture on social media and whatnot. But then a lot is pressure on the manager, or the manager directly placing it on the artist, or just like so many, it's like if you take a $500,000 or a couple $1,000,000 check, you have to achieve like revenues that are just simply, they're like unrealistic for most artists on LP1 or LP2, and you don't have the privilege to then cook and kind of slowly and find the best way for you to express your art. You don't have the opportunity to kind of hit like I see artist development as a series of milestones that are hit, and a lot of those milestones are repeated artist to artist, and some of them are very unique to an artist, but like it's kind of like going through and processing those milestones. And when all of a sudden a huge check comes in, even if it might change like the financial reality or the economy of you and your family, it all of a sudden means that those milestones need to process much more quickly, maybe more quickly than you were able to process them. And I think it can lead to radical doubt more quickly with an artist. And I don't know that radical doubt is a good recipe. You don't want that ingredient in the creative process. I don't think that's, if you ask me, that's just not a good, keep that ingredient out,
Yeah, radical doubt. It's sort of like dropping a turd in the stew.
Yeah.
It's like that's never going to taste great. Wow, that's a little more gross than I was expecting. That's really helpful. Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is that with there's different types of approaches, and for like a major record label, one of the risks is if you are building your music career and it's like a building, you want to make sure you're built on a solid foundation and that you find the right ground to build on. It's not built on like sand. And then once you start building, you need to make sure that the pillars are in place and the foundation is there, so that if there's a storm, that it's going to stay sturdy. And one of the risks is, you might be able to have all the materials to build really, really fast. But if you feel this pressure to build so fast that because it has to be XYZ building by XYZ time, then you might take shortcuts on building that real foundation and the structure in a healthy way. And that can make it in the short term maybe appear like you built a building, but then it's very easy for it to come crashing down.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have that strong foundation from the heart and the soul that kind of went into building the foundation in the first place.
Mm-hmm. And some of it is just perception too. Like there are very successful projects out there that if the bar hadn't set so high, had it been done in a different environment under the exact same results, but in a different environment, or that it would feel like a massive success. Selling a lot of tickets for being on the first album or the second album, like selling a lot of vinyl, getting great reviews and all of that. But because it was $1 million check, it feels like, oh man, you only got a third of the way where you needed to go.
Right.
And I see so many talented musicians whose careers are going smashingly. They're doing so well, but they are steeped in radical doubt because it's not to scale with the deal they did, and I feel like that's it's tough, or it's maybe I do think there are situations where maybe it's not just about the size of the check, where you could take a big check and you're in the right place and people are like, hey, we're not in a hurry to hit the numbers that we think you're going to hit. We're not in a worry for the revenues to get to that size, where it really can be a nurturing place, but it's rare. I'd say that's a rare thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. It is really interesting just thinking about the power of expectation and how that can affect, the exact same thing in a different frame. What came to mind as you were sharing that was how when you're playing a show, you almost always want to downsize the room so that it's like a packed room.
Yep, you want that full.
Versus having like if you played a show in a 1,000 cap room and there's only 300 people there, it feels like, wow, there's no one here, and the energy is not there, and
you maybe sold more tickets in the 1,000 cap room than the 300. You maybe sold 400 tickets and made a little more. The bottom line is stronger, but it doesn't feel as good.
Yeah, it is so interesting. Yeah, so 400 tickets sold in a 1,000 cap room versus a sold out crowd of 300 in a 300 cap room. It's significantly different in terms of energy and vibe and the feeling of success.
The hang after the show with the musician who just played an incredible set, when you're like, oh, that was amazing, great job, and they're like, yeah, I know, felt a little baggy in there, it's, I wish we would have sold more tickets. The marketing didn't go, it's like, no, you did a great show. Like, that was amazing. Who cares how much space there was, or that they didn't open the balcony or whatever? It was fantastic, and in the kind of mind or the self report card, is poor. It's like, oh gosh.
Yeah. How do you recommend that artists find the right balance between setting goals and having expectations and ambitions without going too far and kind of having that comparisonitis? Because I feel like in some cases, part of the tension of having goals and comparing yourself to people who are ahead of you is, if done properly, it can motivate you to sort of to hit those milestones or to grow. And if you surround yourself with people who are way bigger than you, then it kind of gives you that that drive to really level up. But on the flip side, if taken the wrong way, that can feel really discouraging, and it can kind of cause you to snap or to have that radical doubt. So I'm curious, from your perspective, where's that balancing line, and how does an artist design that in a way that gives them real progress?
It's tough. I feel for artists. I feel like artists are their own toughest critics, and their own, they're cracking the whip on themselves, waking up. What can I do to build my project today? And it's not just the creation part, but also what could I be doing self-promotion wise? And it's hard. And the landscape of self-promotion now, social media is so vast. That alone can be a full-time job, let alone being on the road, or like doing interviews or recording in the studio, writing. Just being active on social media can be a full-time job. It is hard, and I don't know the answer to what you're saying, but I do think it starts with surrounding yourself with the right people that are aligned, that speak the same language as you, so that you can communicate about it. You don't have to be all bottled up with these tensions, because if most creatives who are making things that they're proud of and expressing themselves do want an audience. Maybe a few are okay just doing it in a vacuum and everything, but most really, it's not just creating or expressing for themselves. They want it to be witnessed, and they want an audience, and we have more metrics now in 2025 than we've ever had to judge the shape, the size, the depth, the quality of the audience. It's dizzying. And so I think it's a really confusing place, and I think those musicians that generally are the most, I don't know, it's I think that are able to kind of come to peace with the commerce, where the commerce is and where the creative is, and try to find that sweet spot where they can kind of live together without clashing, and oftentimes the commerce can clash or hurt the creative. And I think it does have to do with, like, what's your who do you have to talk to, who are the people on your inner circle that you're able to kind of communicate with and share and almost process, almost like, what's your therapy system, kind of business and creative therapy. I think that's big. I think finding people who are like-minded and aren't expecting you to be something that you're not, that have just the right amount of motivating energy, Some people want to be pushed, some people can't be pushed,
Mm.
and I think it's really kind of has to be tailored to the specific musician. I don't, and it gets really exciting at first when people are writing about your art, but then it kind of hits maybe a tipping point where maybe you shouldn't read about what people are saying about your art. Maybe you got to stop reading the comments, you know,
Mm.
um, because it can drive people crazy, you know.
Mm.
Um, and so, yeah, I don't really know. I don't have a great answer for it, but I think it has to do with the people, you know, in your life, and maybe whether it's your family or your chosen family, who you surround yourself with, and and how they kind of help you navigate that kind of the fact that you're doing something publicly, you
Mm.
know, and it can become a like a house of mirrors a little bit,
Mm. Yeah, that's super helpful. So, yeah, the answer that comes to mind as you shared all of that is around because you're talking about how maybe there's not necessarily a one size fits all approach, but it depends on how much tension you want and are able to handle, what your goals are, and how much you can kind of sit in that tension. And for some people, they might really want to be pushed, and some people they might not need to be pushed at all. It
Yeah.
reminds me of this analogy of like a rubber band, where with the proper amount of tension, you can create really good action, but if you pull it too far, it can snap.
Yeah.
And so, making sure that you're intentional about your community, who you're surrounding yourself with, your team, your family, your chosen family, is a great way to kind of have that support and give you more ability to pull back on that rubber band without
Mhm.
snapping, because they're there to support you on that journey.
And I think it's also important to recognize that your appetite or tolerance for the business part of the creative endeavor might change from project to project or over time. It may shift. You might have you might be prepping, like kind of finishing up an album that you're like, wow, I think this is kind of my go for it moment. I'm
Mm.
going to really, and you psych yourself up. You and your team, you get ready. I'm going to really go for it. I'm going to put myself out there on this one.
Mm.
I'm going to be super present. I'm going to say yes more than I did last time, and I'm going to go for it. That that's I've seen that time and again. But then maybe the following album, maybe you're like, okay, I really put myself out there. You know, like we work with an amazing musician named Mitski, who used to be really out there, and was really engaged in social media and was just, was online, you know, and then after a while, she kind of felt like, I feel like I'm giving too much of myself for this to feel good. I need to
Mm.
pull back. And for the most part, she got offline and started to gatekeep much more how much access the world had to her, how much the fans had of her, and instead she would put it into the album and then put it on stage. But aside from those two places, she was kind of absent, and her mental health flourished, but she also had been massively successful. So it was, kind of had built it to a point where, um, it felt like, okay, it could sustain it, even if it is plateaus there, or even if it, it's kind of starts dipping down because your participation in kind of the marketing process, um, becomes, you decrease it. It's still at a sustainable level for you, and I
Mm.
really think it's different from person to person or from season to season, and I think trying to surround yourself with people who can kind of move with you and kind of adjust accordingly, maybe to compensate for some things or to support you.
Mm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of wisdom in the concept of seasons, and kind of crop rotation, and just like breath in and breath out. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
times to to really drive and really go all in and put yourself out, and there's times for just like sort of coming back and recentering and and getting offline. And it sounds like what you're recommending is that you just pay attention to what phase you're in right now, what feels right, what actually supports the creative work. And it might be different at different points of your career. You might feel a different calling towards what's
Mm-hmm.
right for you. Mm. So one thing that, I mean, it probably wouldn't be the Modern Musician podcast if we didn't have at least one part of this conversation addressing big new development at the time of us having this conversation, which is just AI in music, AI in music promotion, AI in music creation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I'm curious to hear your perspective as someone that's been in this industry for decades and seeing revolutions and seeing things like internet-based distribution, social media. Now having the tools to be able to take what used to take months or years to create music and be able to create tracks and songs really quickly. What's your general take on the current landscape of AI? And what would your recommendations be for an artist right now who might be a bit concerned, just kind of like watching, like, wow, this is a huge tidal wave. What should I do with this thing?
Yeah, I think AI. There's a couple conversations embedded in there. One is AI as a tool for human creators to express themselves, and I know and my colleagues, we're all for you know use it in the studio, do whatever, or on stage, or use it whether it's visually or sonically. It's no. I mean, go back to the synthesizer, which was going to replace orchestras. Back in the late '70s, or it was going to, um,
Drum machine.
the vocoder, drum machine, auto tune, whatever. It was like, oh, so now any bozo can be a singer. It's just like, come on. It's like these are beautiful tools that have real artistic merit. Period. End of story. I think AI. I think we'll look back at this era and be like, the fear of it being used by humans to make cool things. It's like it's a little bit probably silly. I think where the tidal wave that you refer to is maybe a different thing, and that's the mass manufacturing of songs. The creating thousands of songs like a farm, generating them and just pumping them out on DSPs and everything to displace, human-made music. I think that is like, just from a purely statistical standpoint, terrifying. It will impact things. It will impact the economy. It will disrupt the economy intensely, and it will go to the very few profiting, and it will disenfranchise the many. That is something we need to pay attention to, and I've been seeing in the last couple of weeks, and this morning got an email from a musician that we've worked with for over a decade, who had a song that wasn't his band put up on DSPs, labeled as his band, and it's clearly AI, and it's just like, and the DSPs need to create gatekeeping mechanisms to prevent that. We're able to take it down, but it takes a few days, and and if these things happen faster, we could spend, it's such a waste of time. But it just shows, like, if this was scaled up, it could become gargantuan, and it's using someone else's, their own likeness, their intellectual property. It's gross, and it needs to be handled. But like, yeah, it's pretty scary, And in the way, I don't think we can trust the DSPs right now to manage their algorithms in a way that don't favor AI generated, bot generated music from supplanting human generated music. I don't think we can trust that right now. Or even if we can, even if there's a few like good actors out there, can we trust them in a few years also? There's no, it's pretty gross, and I don't really know what to do. I'm kept up at night by it. It's spooky, real spooky. I don't know, I don't know if I don't know if it's gonna require legislation. It'll take a different set of leaders to figure that out. But it's real gross.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That feels like a very honest answer, which I think is, about as honest as any of us can be. It's just like there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot that we just don't really know about where things are headed and it's okay. It's reasonable to both see the massive opportunities and the positive and the creativity benefits that come from it, as well as acknowledge the potential risks and the downside and the challenges from it. Um, I hadn't really thought about that idea a whole lot, but you're right. It is terrifying. Just sort of the programmatic generation of a full industry of songs. Like what that comes to mind for me is sort of like having a AI bot that pays attention to all of the headlines and the news and like all of the current events, and then generates like potentially viral songs or music that are meant to tap specifically into the zeitgeist of like what we're experiencing as a culture. I know there's some very interesting like cover remix AI tools where there's one with like a 50 Cent song recently that got remixed to be like a 50s jazz song and it went viral. And I would expect to see a lot more kind of cover remix things like that sort of come up. And bottom line is more and more music, right? It's gonna be more saturated than ever. So in that world, as an independent artist, how do you cut through the noise and how do
Yeah,
you build community?
yeah,
And um, yeah, it makes me grateful that there's folks like yourself that that have a true human passion, for the art itself and the collection and
hmm
the culture of what makes music what it is. Yeah, I feel like the fact that like communities are really like at the core, like the heart of music, and I don't know, the communities of AI robots. I don't think we're quite like I guess maybe when there's like humanoid robots, like they'll form communities, but I don't know. It seems
I
like one
mean,
thing that's gonna be hard to replace.
yeah, I mean, bots clumping together and clustered into it's not. I mean, it's probably already there. I mean, I do think like um, subcultures like we're participating in, where we're actively participating, where the fans are actively participating, the artists are actively participating. And I'm not talking like mainstream, massive success, but like like the pocket of the world where we and our artists kind of move around it. It's not just one pocket. We contain multitudes, but it is kind of generally a solar system of fans and whatnot. And I do think that they do crave and will continue to seek out, even if things get a little more dystopian, will continue to seek out and surround them and fill their lives with not just music, but media in general, art in general, that is made by humans with a personality, with a story, with pathos, and I think that that's still going to persist in the same way that when like physical sales plummeted in the aughts, and then the early 2010s, like physical was in, CDs crashed, and everything. We were kind of okay because like our like the subculture that we were most often traversing within were people who actually still wanted to hold things. They kind of cared about that. They were over Our fans were over indexing, with physical sales. They kind of still wanted to feel they wanted like something on their shelf, or wanted that kind of a prize or a reminder or something, to kind of more things to look at, and touch. And I hope that that will persist when there are so many more like replicants out there in the on DSPs and whatnot, where you can't quite tell the difference between the two. I think the heads will still know,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll be able to, you almost have a sixth sense for it,
Mm-hmm.
and will seek out the good stuff, the people actually participating and contributing to the culture,
Mm. Yeah, yeah, it is a little bit like back to the analogy that we were talking about at the beginning of the conversation around building the house on the right foundation, or maybe another way to look at it is like setting the roots
hmm
for like a tree. If you have strong roots that are actually born in something real and authentic, and it's a community, then that's going to withstand storms better than something that grew really fast and looks really flashy and cool, but it doesn't have real roots to it,
yeah.
and therefore it's easier to topple over.
Yeah.
That gives me a little bit of solace as well. I think it's a good way to think about it.
It does, and also, I think a lot of subcultures really thrive in environments with really clear adversity, and so I'm trying to see a little bit of a silver lining on something that spooks the heck out of me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. Well, Chris, aka Ron Swanson's cousin, it was great connecting with you today. I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the podcast. And for anyone who is listening or watching this right now and wants to connect more with you or the collective resources that you've created, what's the best place for them to go to learn more?
I would go either to secretlygroup.com, or you can find me on socials at Chris Swanson _secretly.
Awesome. The secret is out. I'm sure you've never heard any jokes about secrets before.
Not in 29 years, haven't, no.
Awesome. Well, like always, we'll put the links in the show notes for easy access. And Chris, thanks again for being on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.